Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Peter Frank and I'll be leading our training today. Today we'll be talking about creating a custom worship bulletin with Lutheran Service Builder. There's a number of different things you can do with Lutheran Service Builder, including planning a presentation for your church and also a playlist. We're not going to focus on that today. All we're going to talk about is custom bulletins. So you are in for a treat. Again, my name is Peter Frank. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager of Church Supplies here at CPH. I've been with the Lutheran Service Builder team for about 2.5 years, maybe not quite a half yet, two years or so. But during that whole time, we've been working on the new online Lutheran Service Builder. So I've been very involved in that process, and I've been working with our software division, Concordia Technology Solutions, for over 6 years now. So you probably have seen me leading other webinars if you have any of our other products. I've worked with a number of different products here at the publishing house. But I've been with our organization for 11 years. So I used to manage our bookstores, and I travel around the country at our different locations. So I thank you for being here. I don't get to go out and talk with people as much, but I'll always enjoy welcoming people in and being able to show them additional information and training on our products. My contact information is on there. Email is the best way to reach me, although my phone number is also listed. That'll take you right to my office phone. And I encourage you to leave a message if I don't answer. I'm typically not in my office. I go to a lot of meetings and work with others in the building. But right now, I always like to check and make sure that it's forwarding to voicemail. So don't try calling now. Other people have tried calling me during webinars while they're watching me, and that doesn't work out so well. All right, so a few housekeeping items before we get going. First off, I'm planning about 50 minutes for presentation here. My plan will be to leave 10 minutes for question and answers at the end, but to make it more efficient, I ask, oops, there we go, wrong direction. I ask that you ask your questions throughout. And if you ask a question, it'll go into my queue over here, and I'll know exactly how many we've got waiting for me, which will allow me to decide, do I cut it off right at 50 minutes or do I keep going a little bit? Because there's more than enough to talk about today. Finally, we are recording this webinar and we'll be sharing that later on today. So if you miss a spot or you want to review something or want to share this with somebody else at your church, or maybe you just have to step away for a few minutes, just know that the recording will be available after the fact and you can review that. We'll also post it publicly on our resource center. So if you are one of those watching us after the fact, I'm sorry you couldn't join us live, but I'm glad you were able to still get this information. So thanks for watching later on. All right, a little bit about Lutheran Service Builder in case you don't know what it is. It is a web-based program that allows churches to quickly and easily plan services, create custom bulletin interiors, export presentations and playlists, and conform with copyright requirements. So there's a number of different things. Our focus today is on that middle part there, create custom bulletin interiors. There's a number of different things we could dive into, and stay tuned for webinars on that later on. But today is all about creating that custom bulletin for your church. So I always like to make a few assumptions about those who are watching before I start the presentation or before I plan it out. So my assumptions for you are that you understand the basics of the liturgy. I may throw out some liturgical terms that if you're not familiar with it, I'm not going to have the time to explain it, so I'm assuming you know those. Otherwise, feel free to pull up Google and you can take a look at some of those as you go. I am assuming you're new to the online Lutheran Service Builder, and this is a pretty safe assumption because it just came out in July. We had an early release before that, but that's not that long ago. So there's not that many people who have been using the new online Lutheran Service Builder. If you are one of our field testers that started using it at the beginning of the year, well, you might have a little bit more information than everybody else, but I think you'll still learn some things today too. Finally, I'm assuming you have a subscription or at the very least a free trial. A free trial will give you access to everything that we're showing today, except for the exporting. That gets into copyrights, and that's where payment has to come into play. So even if you can't do that, you'll still learn a lot. Even if you're getting ready to subscribe and you're not there yet, this will help give you a head start once you are good to go. So if you want to start a free trial, you can go to lutheranservicebuilder.com. If you are a current Lutheran Service Builder 2 customer and you're worried about starting a free trial because it doesn't have all your information in, have no fear. You can start that free trial and bring your service information into your account after the fact. So go ahead and sign up and get started with us today so that you can follow along while I present. All right, now is the time where you get to tell me a little bit about yourself. the first question I have for you, if you could let me know what your primary role at church is. In the church, people have many different roles. This is just your primary role. We've had people who are pastors and of small congregations, and they're the only staff person, and so they can operate as the secretary and sometimes the janitorial crew as well. So this is just your primary role to give me an idea of who is here. And it looks like, and maybe it's just the time of day we're at, but an overwhelming number of you are in that administrator role. So we have just about everybody has voted at this point. I'll go ahead and stop the voting, and I can go ahead and share this with you so you can see that we've got about 70% of you who are here today in that administrator role. So very good. That makes sense given the topic for today. So I'm glad you're here. All right, the next question, just to help me know how in-depth I should get on some of these key or maybe basic functionality of Lutheran Service Builder. Are you using the new online Lutheran Service Builder in your congregation? Have you already converted over to the new version, or are you still considering that? So the answers are yes, no, or no, but planning to subscribe soon. And that'll give me a better idea of who's already active. And it looks like right now, we've got about half, a little over half are in that no, and another 13% or so are in the no, but planning to soon. So only about 35% of you are using it. The current or the new online version. So that's very good to know. Thank you for answering that question. The last question I have, and I asked this for this presentation, but more so for other areas, is what lectionary does your church use? This is always helpful to me as part of our product team here in deciding what kind of products to produce at the publishing house. Because we know there are some one-year churches out there, one-year lectionary churches, but we also know that it's not as large as the 3-year. And so sometimes it can be hard to produce products for the one-year lectionary because there's just not enough volume there. But this helps me. So let's see, we've got about 83% on the 3-year, 13% on the 1-year, and another 4 on not sure. And that's okay. Depending on your role, you may just be taking down whatever is planned out in advance. All right. Well, that is enough of the question and answers. Thank you so much for sharing those with me. That helps me quite a bit. All right. So the outline for today, it's pretty simple. We're going to plan a service. We're going to select the elements. We're going to edit the formatting of those elements, and we're going to export the content. And really those first 3 are the key parts of it because the export is so easy that it only takes a few clicks. So I'll show you that at the very end, but the rest of the time we'll be going through the basic planning of a service. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch over to Lutheran Service Builder. And you may notice that it's taking up my whole screen. It is a web-based application, and so typically you would access it in your browser, whether it's Google Chrome or Internet Explorer or Firefox. Google Chrome has this option of saving it to your desktop, which is just really creating a shortcut. But the shortcut opens up Google Chrome with no bookmarks, no URL bar, kind of strips out all the browser stuff and just gives you that browser window. And so it creates a bigger screen. And I like to do that for the different webinars that I lead. The other thing I like to do is zoom in, because I know for you, you're watching this on a screen within your screen. And so it's going to be pretty small. Now, I know sometimes that depending on your resolution, it might be hard to read Lutheran Service Builder because there's a lot of information on the screen. If you hit Control and scroll, or Control and the plus or minus buttons, you can zoom your screen in the same way. So just a few little helpful hints as we get started. So today we're going to look at the 18th Sunday after Pentecost. That is coming up in just 3 days. It's crazy to believe that we're near the end of September. So when I click on that, it takes me to this view, which is the propers. Now, I have my church set up for 3-year, I believe, based on what I'm looking at. And so you can set your church for the 1-year lectionary. Since we've got about 13% of you who are using the 1-year, let me show that real quick. If you go up to the settings and you go to account settings, I've got several locations here, just 2, I guess, Resurrection Lutheran Church, Resurrection Lutheran School. You can click on it and change between the 3-year and 1-year. If you're using a custom lectionary, I'm sorry, I can't help you, although you can always override the lectionary, so you don't have to worry about that. All right, so that's how you go. We'll stick with the 3-year for today, and you can see there's the readings and all the other propers are at the bottom: introit, collect, gradual, verse. So those are all available for you to see, and it gives you an idea of what's coming up, because this part of it is for service planning. So you can go far ahead. You don't have to do 1 week at a time. You can do planning, the initial planning for several services at a time. If you have some special occasion coming up, or I had one person tell me, we were looking at something for the Easter, and pastor said, you should remind me to include this. And he's like, all right, well, she went in and went to the Easter service or around that time and added it in as a note, because you can plan far in advance. And so to start that planning process, you go up to the top right corner and click Plan this service. And this will take you to the service plan view, which will apply the readings from the lectionary and add that right in here. You can see there's the 4 readings assigned. And then it gives you the option to add hymns, choose an order of service, add additional rights, and put notes in. And that's where she put the notes in for our upcoming information. Now, the readings are assigned based on the lectionary, but you don't have to go with that. You can always add additional readings or remove them. So let's say we don't want to use the gospel from Mark chapter 9. We can select it and click the X next to it, and that will cut it out. Now I can go and add another reading, and maybe I want to do John 1:1. I'll type in that, and it'll show me where that selected verse is used elsewhere in the different lectionaries. So sometimes it's the first 14 verses of John, sometimes it's the first 18 verses, and typically it's on Christmas Day. So you can see here, they are alternate readings for the same day. So you've got 8 options here, all for Christmas Day and all 4 lectionaries: the 1-year, the 3-year A, B, and C. So I could go and click one of these and say 1 to 14, and now that is going to be my reading. If I X out of that and just go back to add a reading, and I clear out my search, you can see it still shows the suggested readings for today. So maybe you're going back and forth on which readings and you want to see what the propers are. Well, you can always see the suggested readings just by clearing out your search. So we'll go ahead and add Mark 9 back in, because that's very appropriate for this day in the church year, of course, as the lectionary would recommend. Next, you can add hymns. So what you're doing when you're adding hymns is you're saying, I'd like to sing these hymns, or I'd like for the congregation to sing these hymns on this Sunday. I don't know exactly where in the service it's going to go yet, but let's go ahead and earmark those for use in the future service. So when you click Add Hymn, it gives you a place to add 1 hymn. So you can see on the right, there's suggested hymns. The first one is the hymn of the day, which is like a proper. So we can say, yeah, we're definitely going to sing the hymn of the day. I'm going to go add another hymn. All right, the next grouping is hymns for the readings. Now these are the readings assigned for the week. So if you change the readings on the or change the readings up here, it's still going to show that according to the lectionary. So just know that if you changed it to John 1, it's not going to change your suggested hymns. It's going to be based on the readings for this day in the church year. Finally, you have down here other suggested hymns. Those are based on the themes for this church year, or for this day in the church year. So they may not tie directly to the readings, but they follow the similar themes of those readings. I don't know a better way to describe it other than using the word theme again and again. Now, if you have used the worship planning book from Concordia Publishing House, and if you use Lutheran Service Builder too, you may have noticed that those don't always align. Well, we've aligned those in the new version. And so this will match up with what is in your worship planning book. So let's go ahead and just add a few hymns. Where charity and love prevail. And then, what is the world to me? Now let's go down and other suggested hymns. God's own child, I gladly say it. There we go. So we've got 4 hymns chosen. We'll figure out where in the service they go in a few moments. But next, we'll plan the order of service. Now, you don't have to do any of this, but if you don't select an order of service, that's going to be the first thing you need to do when you go to prepare the bulletin. So it's always helpful to select that first. Now, when you select it, you can see all the available services from Lutheran Service Book. the divine service settings 1 through 5, daily offices like matins and vespers, morning, evening prayer, comp line, and so on. There's seasonal services, there's daily prayer for individuals and families. Maybe you're putting together a service for a shut-in visit. So there's a lot that goes into this. I think most commonly you'll be using the divine service. That makes the most sense. And today we're going to use setting 1. That's the one I'm most familiar with. That's the one that I use most in my training webinars, so it helps keep me kind of in line. All right, lastly here, where you can add something is the rites. So if you have something special occurring, you can keep notes of this, saying, okay, well, holy baptism, we've got a baptism coming up this Sunday. I need to make sure to add the rite in there. So I'm going to go ahead and plan that. That helps others on the church staff or volunteers, if there are people working on this with you, know what's going on. And finally, you can add notes, and that's for anything else that you might want to put in here that there's not a space for. So if you want to put that Pastor Smith is preaching, maybe the Sunday school choir, oops, that's Sunday school choir, there we go, is singing, things like that. You know, again, this is service planning, not just for this one service, but looking ahead. And so you can jot down notes that are helpful to you in the long run. All right, the last thing down here, you can see 2 little links: change name, date, or holiday, and delete this service. You might want to change it. So like right now, the date is September 23rd, the holiday, which is the day of the church year that we are using from the lectionary, is Pentecost 18. You can see nearby holidays if you want, or other special occasions. Finally, you can change the name, and maybe you don't want it to spell out 18th. You just want the 18th. We can do that. So nothing too major there, but it helps you modify the service if it's not exactly what you were thinking. All right, let's go ahead and prepare the bulletin. That's really the meat of this presentation. And to do that, you go up to the top right, and there's 3 links there. This is the first one, prepare bulletin. There's also prepare presentation and prepare playlist. So prepare presentation is if you are using a PowerPoint or slides for your service. And playlist is if you want to play the music from Concordia Organist, which is all pre-recorded hymns from Lutheran Service Book. But we're going to go with Prepare Bulletin today. So it's going to take a second and load the service based on everything that I have pre-selected. There we go. Now, this is the time when you can really start customizing it. What I've shown so far, pretty much every church will do in a very similar fashion, maybe not identical, but very similar, where you'll plan these things out in advance. Going forward, this is when you can put your own preferences or your church's preferences in there. So we've formatted this to look like a word processor, but it doesn't operate like a word processor. With a word processor, your primary tools are changing how it looks, the font family, the size, the colors. None of that is here. We're going to get to that in a little while. The first thing that we're going to do is select the elements and choose how they are displayed, regardless of all the styles. Like I said, we'll get to that, and that's called formats. So we'll take a quick look here. It, again, looks like a word processor. You can see the shape of the paper is in there. That's based on our bulletin format, which we're using the default right now. You can see that we also have Divine Service setting 1. That is pre-selected from before. And now we'll go through it. And you've got headings and different elements, like here's the hymn. That's what's called the caption. And then to the far right, the sub-caption. Then you've got rubrics, which are typically red. In this style, they're not. It's expecting that you're printing on a black and white printer. And then different elements. Now, you can see as I hover over it, a blue box goes around and a little bit of a blue background. When you select that, when you click on that, you get another tab at the top in the ribbon that tells what element that is. In this case, it's a heading element. Here, I have a hymn of invocation. That's a hymn element. When I click on it, I have more options to the right to select hymns. When I click here, it's a rubric. Same with the second one. Now next, I have what's called the invocation. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Now this invocation is just showing the text, but no caption. I can add a caption up here in the ribbon by clicking caption, and that turns that on. And I can say just none and say, just show me the caption. Now this starts to get a little confusing because then the invocation with no additional content is right above the exhortation. So you might want to do it something like this if you're going to be consistent. Oops, go to none. So we'll take a look at that in just a few moments. So I'll take that off and I will go reverse what we were doing there. Now you'll see that as I'm clicking on these are different parts of worship. You can see on the far right that I have different options as I go. Now there's only so many invocations you can use. That's pretty standard. I don't know how else you can change that. But like the exhortation, there's different ones in the different divine services. So even though we're using divine service setting 1, you might want the exhortation from divine service setting 3. It's a little bit different. Setting 2 is the same. Setting 4, setting 5. So you can change that up. It's still the same worship element at the same proper place, but it's different. It's not based on the same setting of the divine service. So that's one way you can change things. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add these captions in for right now because I like to show that. But what I'm going to do is remove this heading here. Now, we know that these are different orders of service or the different parts of this service. So like in this case, it's the service of confession and absolution and service of the word. For many people, that might be confusing. And I know a lot of churches choose to remove the headers because the elements may be the same, but there's no point in having the confusion. That's also a good teaching opportunity. So that's obviously up to your preferences. So I don't want to say you need to do this. But if you wanted to, you can just delete those different elements and remove that heading. And we can go down to service of the word and remove that. And then the service of the sacrament is down here. We can remove that. So we just remove headings altogether. That's one way to remove headings. All right, now we're going to go in here and see. So here we have, we've got several different rubrics. So you stand after the hymn of invocation, the sign of the cross may be made. Maybe that's not the practice in your church. You don't want that rubric, you can delete that. There. Maybe you don't want to stand for the hymn of stand after the hymn of invocation. You want to stand beforehand. So you can click move and drop it in right beforehand. You can also drag and drop, and you can see here as I drag and drop, it gives different locations. So we could put it back afterwards. So that's some of the functionality for moving around elements or modifying them. But let's go through selecting elements. So one way to select it, like in this example of hymns, is that there's a placeholder there without the selection. When I click on the hymn of invocation, I can look over at the right. Like in the service plan, I have hymn of the day, hymns for the readings, and other suggested hymns. But before all of that is my service plan that I had planned out just a few moments ago. So there are the 4 hymns I selected in the same order that I selected them. So Lord of Glory, you have bought us. When I hover over that, I can see that it highlights that and also highlights it under hymn of the day. That's a reminder that that hymn is used for hymn of the day, so I may not want it for hymn of invocation. Now I could go to where charity and love prevail, see it's a hymn for the reading. What is the world to me? It highlights there. God's own child, I gladly say it. It will highlight down here. I just won't be able to see it because of my screen. So I could say, what is the world to me? And select that right there for my hymn of invocation. That may not be the best one to use for the hymn of invocation, but bear with me as we go. All right, so the hymn is shown as a text only. Now I can choose a number of different things to modify this hymn. I could say, well, I don't want to sing all 4 stanzas. We only want to sing 3 of them. So we'll cut out stanza 3. That modifies that there. So 1, 2, and 4. And you can see my sub caption has now changed to be 1, 2, and 4 up there. I can also, as I click on it again, say, don't show just text only. I want to see the melody. And we can do that. And it still has stanza 3 removed, but it shows the melody for all of it. So you can modify how it looks in line right here and see exactly how it's going to look when you print it. So that's some of the modification you can do when selecting elements. Let's go down a little bit further here. You'll see on some of these, I've got this blue line with a little arrow to the left of it. This is what we call an option box. So when I click on that, it expands. Now this here, when I click on it, is absolution. I also have declaration of grace. It's hard to see those because right now they're just options. That's taking into account the preferences for caption. By default, these captions are not shown, but if I click on each one of them and do caption, I can see what they are, and as I choose between them, I certainly wouldn't do both of those because you don't need to do both of them. One is sufficient, but you might choose Declaration of Grace when you don't have pastor there. Maybe it's the vicar leading. That happens at my church regularly on Saturday evenings when we don't have communion. Our vicar will lead and pastor will get the evening off. So there's different options for that. But it helps you by saying, well, here are your choices. We'll select the one that's typically preferred, but you can always choose the other one if you wanted to. And the same thing goes down here. Intro is selected, but you can also choose the psalm, or you can choose an entrance hymn if you wanted to. You don't have to choose the same thing every time. You've got those options. All right, so we'll continue to go down here. There's the Old Testament reading. When I select that, you'll see that there is a response at the end. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This is part of what we call a template. It surrounds the content, and this is the standard response. But if I go up here into the ribbon and click the drop down, the standard response is shown. But as I scroll down, I can see other ones. The daily office response is, "Oh Lord, have mercy on us. Thanks be to God." We could say, well, it's the Old Testament. Let's add an introduction for it. It says the Old Testament reading is from book, chapter, content. That says this is how it'll be by default, but then we'll fill in the blanks with what's selected for the service. So when I click on that, now I have the Old Testament reading is from Jeremiah chapter 11. My response at the end is still the same, but I've now surrounded it. And that's a neat way of being able to do that. Now, you might want to print something separate for your lector that doesn't show that in the bulletin for everybody. That's your choice, and you have that option by creating custom formats. We'll take a look at that later on. You can also create custom orders of service that pre-select that. But that's not what we're going into right now. We're going to continue to go down and next find the hymn of the day. So there is the hymn of the day right after the Holy Gospel. And we're going to select, "O Lord of Glory, you have brought us." Now you'll see here, even though we have selected up at the very top that the hymn of invocation is shown melody, down below at the hymn of the day where we just were, there we go, it's still showing the text. That's because the default for this format is to show the text, not the melody. So I can change that here and override that. I can always change the subcaption out by default. The subcaption shows the stanzas. Unless we're showing all the stanzas, then it just goes blank. But you can use the subcaption to say, "Please stand," or something like that, if you don't want to have the rubric here. Now, that might not be the most practical of examples, but it can work. That's your call. All right, down here, next we have sermon. Now, as you click on the sermon, that's really just a placeholder. But you can click in here and type in sermon title. And then you could put whatever scripture verses it was. Mark chapter 9, I believe. Oops. So you can modify those elements right in line. You can't do that for all worship elements. You can't go and just change the invocation. You can create custom worship elements. So there's some things that are straight from the hymnal that you can't change, but things like this that are placeholders, you could change that. In fact, you can even do that for the hymns. So you can go in here and say, oops, hymn of the day. Now, I'll caution you on this. If you do this and then decide to change it, let's say we go to where charity, where charity and love prevail. If I change the hymn, but I've already modified the caption, it won't update. It's seen that as, we want to keep this caption as it is. So just a word of caution, wait to change the captions until you are completely done. Now, I did forget to mention this before. You have an undo and redo. So I can click these buttons to redo what I did or undo what I did. Oops. There we go, or undo. You can also use Control Z and I believe Control Y. Maybe not Control Y. I know Control Z works to undo what you had selected. Yeah, see. So you have that option to go back as if you make a mistake. All right, we'll continue going down. Let me remove that rubric. There's the sermon, the Nicene Creed. You see there's another option box there. Now that's a little tougher because I've got it zoomed in. When I click the down, I have to scroll down to see the other options. But maybe we're going to do the Apostles' Creed today. All right, next we have prayer of the church. I'm going to divert from our presentation right now to show you something cool that kind of fits in with this custom bulletin and kind of doesn't, because it's not so much custom for your church, but it's a way to easily add the prayer of the church. Now, the worship office at the LCMS on a regular basis produces prayer of the church called Let Us Pray files. And those are available for free from download from their website and in a Word document. Now, what we do on a regular basis after they publish them is we convert them to an LSBX file. So if you go to LutheranServiceBuilder.com and scroll down to the bottom, you can see a download page in the navigation. And I'll explain why it's so difficult to find in a second. So you can go down here and go to Downloads. This allows you to download this LSBX file, as we call it, which is a builder file that you can then import into Lutheran Service Builder. So this downloads page is the first thing on the page, and whether you're using 1 year or 3 year, you can select that. And so here's September 23rd. We'll select the 3 year. When you download the file, it'll give you a zip file. That's because some browsers see an LSBX file as potential spammy. They just don't know what it is. It's not a common file format. So we can move this zip file over here and put it over on my desktop. Close that up. And then when you go into Builder, you can add that. We'll show you how to add it in a second. Let me go back here. So the reason it's so hard to find is because for potential customers, which is who our website is geared for, as you're learning about Lutheran Service Builder, you don't really care about LSB or Let Us Pray files yet. That's for those who are already using it. But once you start using it and you want to go here regularly, what I would recommend doing is signing up to receive notifications. So after we post them on the website, we send an email to everybody who's subscribed to these notifications and send it to you saying, here's a link, go download them. So you don't have to keep coming back there. You can just click the link in the email. Now, when you sign up for this, it's just signing up for Let Us Pray files. It's not for anything else. So we won't be spamming you with things on our other products. It's just for Let Us Pray files. So just something to keep in mind. But let me show you how that works in Builder. So what we can do is up in the settings, I click the settings cog, and then go to import from LSBX file. And it gives me an open, and I'll go down here to September 23rd on my desktop and open that file. Now, I've already done this several times, so it's going to tell me, yep, it's already been imported. Great. Let me add this in. So prayer of the church is just a placeholder, but it's not a worship element per se. So you can't just click on it and go select another one. So you do have to click Insert and then Element, and I usually put it right below it. And then I go search for it. I'll type in September 23rd. There we go, September 23rd, Series B. And when I select that, there is the prayer of the church as compiled by the worship office. And what is fantastic about this is that it's the same prayer that's been prayed for by other churches, or the same prayers. And you can see here, because I've already selected it, I've made some modifications in there for Matthew, our Synod President, for Reverend Lee Hagan, our District President. We've added some of those in on our file, and you can do the same within my worship resources. But this is a great way to keep a fairly consistent prayer across all of our churches. So once you add that in, you can go in and take this placeholder and delete that. So I always like to bring that up because so many people still don't know about that. And it's just a fantastic way to save time by not having to type up these yourself or convert them from the Word document, or figure out your own prayers. So just wanted to share that with you. All right, I'm going to keep going now. If you have any questions about that, please put them into the chat, because there's always a few questions. All right, we'll continue down here, and you can see the other elements as we go forward. Here's some more option boxes. But what I really want to draw your attention to is down here, distribution. So distribution of the Lord's Supper is straight from the hymnal. And it's obviously a good thing to include. It's a great thing to include. But we don't necessarily need to include everything that's in here, because it is not common practice that your congregation will carry their bulletin up to the altar or to the rail when they're taking communion. We don't really encourage that. So the instructions here are really more for the pastor and the assisting ministers. And so I recommend removing those to save space to prevent some confusion, or maybe putting something like your communion statement here. But either way, we're going to modify this, at least for the purpose of today's presentation. So I can go and select these different elements and just delete them. And when I click delete, it says, do you want to delete this specific element or the entire group? Now, typically you're just going to delete the specific element, but you could delete the whole group. And the group in this case is anything kind of surrounded by this gray line. Might be a little bit hard for you to see on your screen, but we're going to just remove the rubric. And then here we go. This is, you'll see here when you select it, it's left column, and the alternate one is the right column. Those are just straight out of the hymnal. I'm going to delete that as well. And then finally delete this rubric. And this is what the pastor says at the altar. So we'll delete the dismissal. And we'll just leave distribution here. Now, again, you can go and insert a custom element if you wanted to. Right now, we're just going to go ahead and select some distribution hymns. Where charity and love prevail. And God's own child, I gladly say it. All right, we're almost to the end of the service. There is a hymn to depart, which we haven't selected one yet. So you may say, well, how do I pick a hymn to depart? You know, if I haven't selected it during the service plan, how do I find out which ones are good? Well, you can still go to your suggested hymns for this day in the church year, or you can search based on topics. So the first thing I like to do is type in hashtag or pound, depending on what generation you're in, and do hymns. So it's saying, show me only hymns in my search results. Then I'm going to go to topic and colon and quote, and we're going to go to, let's say, I think it's close of service. There we go, close of service. So I'm looking for all hymns within the topic of close to service. I'll click enter. And that gives me some different options. So that is one way to find hymns. And of course, you might have done this during your service planning process. But I'm going to go ahead and select Sent Forth by God's Blessings. That's one of my favorites. So I think that's a fantastic one to go out. As an acolyte, I always preferred other hymns that had more stanzas, because here I only have 2 stanzas to take to extinguish the candles. But it's still a fantastic close of service hymn. All right, so there is our service. It's been customized. It may not be ready to just hit print. We're going to look at some formatting in a moment. But what I want to show next is if you like the changes that you've made here and you want to reuse them again and again and again, it's still the Divine Service setting 1. You've just made some modifications to the elements. You can go and save that. Oops, let me move my webcam. It's blocking my view. I'm going to click Save next to under Document and Order of Service. I'm going to say Save. And it defaults by saying My Divine Service setting 1. You may want to change that to, in this case, my church's name is Resurrections, Divine Service setting 1, and save that. So now under Order of Service, not only do I have everything from the hymnal, but I have this uncategorized section. And it looks like I had another one in there, DS1 modified. I can go and select these at any time, and I can do that during service planning as well. Now, what's nice about it is that the things that are supplied by the lectionary don't stay with your custom service. The locations of those elements do. But next time I use it, if I went for the first week in October, or I guess it'd be September 30th as the next service, I can use that same custom Divine Service setting, and the hymns would not be selected from these. It would give me a place for new hymns to be put in. The readings would be based on the lectionary for that day. So just know that when you're saving this order of service, you're saving the order of service, not the service itself. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's go up here under Settings and go to My Worship Resources. And then I'll go to My Liturgies, which is really what we have saved here. So My Liturgies, there's Resurrections Divine Service, setting 1. It's taking a second. There we go. Now you can see that this order of service has all of these elements listed in an outline here. And those places where we had select groups are shown with those what's called radio buttons. So you can go in here and modify and say, by default, I want to sing This is the Feast instead of Glory in Excelsis. I want to have the psalm rather than the gradual. All of that by default. It's taking your default settings based on your custom service, but you can switch it from here. You can also go in and insert elements or modify these. So we're getting into territory that is really advanced stuff, and we've got some other training webinars about that, some recorded already. So I'm not going to go any farther than that, but I just wanted to draw your attention to this area because it's very powerful, and especially when we're talking about custom orders of service for your church, that's where you can do a lot to save you time week in, week out. But next, I want to go up here. I'm going to close this. And then I'm going to go up to the settings. And I'm going to go to bulletin formats. And this is where we're going to spend most of the rest of our time. So we've got about 10 minutes to go, which is perfect amount of time. I could spend a long time on this, but I think it might get a little overwhelming. So bulletin formats are the combination of styles and page setup and the defaults for how elements are displayed. So let's go to the default bulletin format. You can see on the far right, I have style, layout, and content. Now, typically, content and layout are going to be pretty straightforward for you. And then the style might take a little longer. And so that's why the styles first, is to give you that quick access to it. But really, they're all important. But I'm going to start with layout. So the first thing we decide is what kind of paper is it going on. Now, I don't mean what weight of paper or anything like that, just literally what size of paper and how is it being printed. So by default, it's a letter, and by default, it's portrait and not folded. But I'm going to say I want to go to a legal size one, and I'm going to switch it to landscape, and then I'm going to fold it. And so that gives me this 8.5 by 7 piece of paper, or half sheet of paper. So that's going to be the standard for each page. And you can see that example because you've selected the paper size and the orientation, all of that. The next thing you can do is set the margins, and 1/2-inch margins are typically pretty good. So I don't think you need to do too much with that. Sometimes I like to take the side margins and make them a little bit bigger, maybe 0.6. Do that for the left as well. And maybe the top and bottom go a little bit lower, 0.4. That's up to you. That's obviously your preference. Depending on what kind of paper you're printing on, you may have some things pre-printed with the church's name or anything like that. That might dictate your margins for you. Now next, we have the music, and you can choose to automatically scale that to fit the width, or just to keep it as the image size, which fits most pieces of paper. Now, if you're really skinny, it may go over that. So that's your choice. But you can scale that if your width is too small, then or too large, then the hem might be really large when you scale it. So you'll have to look at that. We'll take a look at that in a second. I'm going to go over here to content next, because this chooses how those elements, this is where you choose how the elements are displayed. So I mentioned before the headings. There's 3 headings in the Divine Service setting 1. You can go and turn those off entirely here. I went through and deleted them, but I could have just gone up here to all headings visible and say, nope, those aren't visible, and uncheck them. Now rubrics, this is where you gotta be a little bit careful, because some rubrics you definitely want to keep in there. The sit and the stand and all that. Some rubrics may not be necessary. So you could choose to turn all rubrics off, or you could choose to remove them or modify them within your liturgy, your custom liturgy. So that's your call, but you could turn them all off if you wanted to. Next, you have hymns. So you can say, well, I want all hymns to be visible, and rather than the text, I want the melody to show. So you can click on melody there. Now I can say, how do I want the caption to show? Well, I want it to always show, or never show, or default. Now that'll be based on the order of service, because some orders of service don't have that in there. So that's your call. I like to keep it at default. Caption format, you can say just the role. So like in this case, hymn of invocation, or you can say the role and the name. And that's kind of nice because it's a great teaching tool for the different parts of worship. Why are we singing this hymn now? Well, it's the hymn of the day, and it's assigned for this day in the church year. You can do things like that if you select the role and the name. One of the downsides, though, is that if you have a really long hymn name, it might break into 2 pages, depending on how your page is set up. So some things to think about. Now, you may not want to show stanza numbers. You may just say, don't show those at all. And really that's, I think that's for all of them. No, it's just for the text. You may have, let's say you have a bunch of stanzas and you've chosen, 1, 5, 7, and 9 or something like that. It might look weird if you just say 1, 5, 7, and 9. So you could just hide the stanza numbers and then people just know, well, we're going to sing these 4 verses or 4 stanzas. So that's up to you. But if you're going to do the show the melody, the stanza numbers will come with because that's part of the image themselves. And then the subcaption. So you've got stanzas here. Maybe you want to do, let's see, PG, and then we'll say LSB, and then page and stanzas. Now there's information in our help center about all of the different subcaption options, and you can access that by going to the I in the lower right-hand corner and type in subcaptions or something like that. So if you don't know what all of those are from Lutheran Service Builder 2, don't worry, we got you covered in the help. All right, then you've got liturgy. You can say all liturgy is visible or not visible. I think you probably want to keep it visible, but maybe you don't want to show all the content. Maybe you want to reference the pages. But if you were doing a bulletin format that is just for your lectors and all they want is the readings, well, that might be something different. All right, so then down here, again, you've got caption default or as being always or never based on the order of service, and then what the subcaption is. Propers are very similar, except you've got a few more options here. You also have chant pointing, verse numbers, because readings are part of the propers. You could hide the verse numbers or show them. That's usually what it is. How do I show the verse numbers? Well, go in here and click show verse numbers. Then showing the headings, which we'll scroll down here. If you show the headings, that's the headings from the ESV Bible. And then show words of Christ in red. You can see that there as a nice example. So you've got some different options there. I'm going to go ahead and save this. The next thing is style. This is probably where you want to get a graphic designer involved, or if you have a communications director at your church, there's probably a style guide to follow. This is where you can choose how the individual elements look from a style sheet perspective. So the first thing you do is you select which section you're talking about. So we've already turned off headings, so I'm not going to worry about headings here. But I could go to captions and say, all right, we're going to go a little bit more formal. So is it Trajan Pro? Yeah, Trajan Pro is one. It's very similar to some of what's used in Lutheran Service Book. You can see here it's a very wide font, so maybe that's not the way to go. Maybe I'll just go to straight up Times New Roman, and I'll make it a slightly bigger size, 12-point font. You can always make it italic or underline. We can also change the color, and maybe you want to make that, maybe you're printing in 2 color and you want that to be the dark burgundy. You've got that option there. Okay. I'm going to go to a different font. I'm going to go with Arial Narrow. There we go. Now, you cannot change the hymn fonts because they are all images when you're using the melody. If you're using text only, then you can change them to your heart's content. They go with a body. So just know that. You'll see here why this hem is displayed. I can't change how that looks. Next we have, we'll go down to rubrics next. Rubrics typically are red. So I'll put it as a bright red, different than my caption. And I'm going to put those as an Arial Narrow as well. There we go. And they're typically italicized. You don't have to keep them that way. And we'll keep them a 10-point font. Now, you may also want to say, well, let's center those, or let's put those off to the right so they're not quite in line with everything. You've got that option too. We'll probably center them. Then we'll get into body. I'm going to go to just a regular Arial there. And I'm going to bump it up to 11, make it a little bit bigger, and I'll keep that font size or font color. But I am going to decrease the indent for everything and move it over to the right. Now, as I do that, I see, okay, my captions are a little close. Let's go back to captions and add a little bit of space after them. So you can see there I've added some breathing room between the captions and the body. So there's probably other things that I would do here. This doesn't look fantastic, but for example, right now, I think it works out okay. It's different enough, you can see how it's customized. So I can go ahead and save that. And now that is my new default caption. Now you may say, Peter, that looks terrible. How do I get back to the default? I like the default one. You can go down here and create a new format, and you're always starting from something. You're not starting from a blank canvas. So you can say new default and say, okay, this is the old default, out of the box, something like that, and get back to it. Your current default is like that. You also have creative worship or large print. There's a number of different things you can do. So I'm going to close out of here. We'll give it a second. There we go. And you can see my default was already selected. I changed the default, so it changed my service, and go through there. And you may want to look through that. Sometimes the defaults don't always work to your advantage. Like here, I probably didn't need to put LSB in there because that shows up. So I'll close out of there. Yeah, LSB 730. But you can see my page has changed. All of my fonts have changed. My colors have changed. Maybe not for the better, but for example, it works out well. And now the last thing is you export it. And that's pretty easy to do. All you do is go up under Document in the ribbon, click Export. And then you have three options: a docx file, which is Microsoft Word or any other common, newer common publisher, word processor. You have rich text format, which is a more of a standardized approach. There's a little less functionality than a docx file, but it works with most word processors. And then you have HTML, in case you wanted to share this on your website. Obviously, take copyrights into consideration, depending on what licenses you have. But I'll click docx, and now it's going to download the file for me. We'll give it a second. There we go. And when I click the Word file, it'll take a second and open up for me. Click Enable Editing. And there we go. And now you'll probably want to go through and adjust page breaks and stuff. It doesn't take that into account because typically there's a little bit of cleaning up you do as you go through here. I know that most church administrators have all sorts of tips and tricks on how to save space and get it to just the right number of pages. But you could go and print this out. And if you wanted to do it for the folded, you do have to set that up, I believe, under page settings. So yeah, multiple pages book fold. I think that actually is already set up straight from Builder, so that's good. And then you can go and print that out. So I'm not going to do that because you can't see my printer. And it's in the other room too, so that'll take a little while for me to go get. But that's how you export it. So may not be the most stylistic format. In fact, as I look at it, I can think of all sort of things that I might have done differently. I like to mix it up though, and this time didn't work out so well. But it is customized. It's unique to exactly what I wanted, and I can use this again and again. So let me go right back into Builder real quick, and I'll go to my calendar. And if I go into October, we'll go to October 21st. I click Pentecost 22. I go to plan this service. I'm not going to add anything in my service plan except for my custom order of service, which will be down at the bottom under uncategorized. And I can add a category too. Another time to go into the categories. Now I can go and prepare my bulletin. And you can see this is my starting point. There's my hymn of invocation. All of my formats are in there. It gives me a very different starting point, but it's all within my custom format. And so I can just go from there. All right, so we are at about 7 minutes till the end. So I went over my 15 minutes by 3, but that's okay. I don't have a lot of questions in there. So feel free to ask questions at this time. See some starting to come across. So let's talk about a few little things here. First off, if you haven't started your free trial, I encourage you to do that today. LutheranServiceBuilder.com. And again, you can do all of this except export with the free trial. Now, if you are already a current customer of Lutheran Service Builder 2, the way to move to the new online version is to schedule a time with one of our software consultants. When you sign up for a time, and I'll put this URL in the comments here, when you sign up for a time with a software consultant, go ahead and send that, there we go. They'll send you a new license agreement that you'll need to sign because it's web-based, that has changed. We'll also align any subscription dates. So many of you have the HIM license, but it'll start at a different time than the Builder license. We're trying to align those to make it easier for everybody. Then you will turn on the access for the new version with you, and they'll send you instructions for how to get started, how to bring your Lutheran Service Builder 2 database into the new online version, or if you're brand new, they'll just show you how to get started. And then finally, they can answer any questions that you might have. So let me put my contact information on the screen one last time before I go and take a look at the questions. So again, my email is probably the best way to reach me, but you can also go and contact our software support team. All right, so we've got a few questions. Is it possible to create a header on my default bulletin that includes church name, title of service, and date of service? Melissa, that's an excellent question. And let me go in and show you briefly how you might do that. So if I go up into settings and my worship resources and my liturgies, I'll click on this custom order right here. And then I'll go and insert a heading and put it up here. And text says heading. What I'll probably do is how it appears in bulletins. It says that right there. So I'm going to say Resurrection Lutheran Church. And then I might add in a caption right after that. Oops, there we go. And the caption, I might say something like, you said title of service, date of service, just title of service, and then I'll put a pipe in, and date of service. You can't auto-populate that, at least not right now, although that's an interesting idea. But you can put that in there, and it can be kind of a clue that you need to go and change that. So I'll hit save. We'll save that to the service. We'll X out here. And let's go and we'll switch, yep, and then go back to it. And it should take effect. There we go. So I didn't change my style on heading, so it looks the same as caption right now. Actually, I have my format. Let me go up to my bulletin formats. I think I did turn off all headings. That's why. That was a caption there. So we'll go to default, go to content, there we go. And then we'll close out of that and we'll go take a look at it. There we go, Resurrection Lutheran Church, title of service, date of service. So you've got that option there. You still have to go in and click it, but you can change it right in line. So if you wanted to say September 23, 2019, I'm jumping a year ahead, 2018. I was working on 2019 stuff before. There you go. So you could do something like that. So I hope that helps. Yep, got your thank you. Very good. All right. How do we set up Psalm of the day responsively? Donna is asking that. Well, Donna, that's a little bit more detailed than I can go into today, but I can get you started. So it is not by default a function within Lutheran Service Builder, but we offer the My Worship resources, which allow you to do things like that rather easily. So we can go in and let's see, here's, go down to the Psalm. So you can copy that, right click and copy that, then go under My Worship Resources and you can just go to My Common Elements and click Add Common Element. And we'll just say Psalm 49:23. We should be able to paste it right in there. There you go. Then you can go and add in the responsorials. So you can say pastor for that. And then we'll go to, see, oh yeah, I gotta add I'll back up a little bit. Oops. Oh, I'm backing up too much. Okay. Let me just go through, paste it in there, add in these spaces to it. Oops, wrong spot. And then you can go in and assign those. So it might take a little bit of work, but we've got those tools in there, and then you can choose whether to leave the verses in and add a space, something like that. So not ideal. We've talked about adding this in as a function. Of course, we would have to pre-format all of those. So there's quite a bit of work involved with that. And we've got a few other projects that are taking priorities. But this is one of those things that we've talked about on the roadmap for new improvements to Lutheran Service Builder. So please know that it's definitely on our radar. It's just not on our roadmap quite yet. So you can do it in here, you can save that, and if you remember, unlike me, to add those spaces in, it can go a little bit quicker for you than what I just showed. So that's how you do that. We'll go ahead and just save that right now, and then you can go and insert that custom element later on. All right, well, we are just about out of time, and I actually don't have more questions. So that must mean that I covered all the things you were looking for. So thanks so much for joining me today. Let me put my information on the screen one last time. Feel free to reach out to me at any time. Although if you are going to reach out tomorrow, go ahead and call support because I'm going to be out of the office tomorrow, but I'll be back in on Monday. So I'm always excited to talk with people about Lutheran Service Builder. So once again, thank you and have a great rest of the day.